How's it going, everyone? Welcome to my channel. My name is Swanee, and for today's video, I'm going over the brand new Freedom's Flame Warbond that was just added in Helldivers 2. Now, as always, these are my first impressions of the Warbond weapons that were just added, and I want to point out that any of these weapons could change at any time. As often as Arrowhead likes to buff and nerf their weapons, my opinions on these weapons today could be completely different in like 2 or 3 weeks or a month from now. So if you're seeing this video in the future and you're like, what the hell is he talking about? This weapon's amazing. You know, just keep that in mind. So in this Warbond, there's a couple of things that I'm going to go over in this video. There's the new armor passive that they added. There's the new Firebomb Hellpods. And then there's 3 new weapons. There's the SG-451 Cookout, the FLAM 66 Torture, and the P72 Crisper. And to start things off, the first thing I want to go over is the new armor passive, the inflammable armor passive. There are 2 new armor sets in the Warbond that have this passive, and then if you check the Superstore today, there are 2 new outfits in the Superstore that also have this armor passive. Now what this passive does is that it provides you with a 75% damage resistance to fire, allowing the bearer to rest assured in their inflammability. So in my testing, I found that when you're wearing regular armor, fire will kill you in about 3 to 4 seconds if you just stand in the fire and let it cook you. And then with this brand new armor passive, if you're standing in the fire, it will take about 10 seconds for the fire to kill you. So that's a pretty significant buff to fire resistance. And with this new Warbond, of course, all the new weapons do fire damage. So between the new weapons and the old flamethrower and the incendiary bombs and the incendiary mines, like, this game has a ton of fire. And I found myself really enjoying this new armor passive. I feel like this armor passive is a lot more useful than a lot of the armors in this game. I was having a lot of fun just painting the ground with fire and standing in it. Like, I would just lure the enemies into the fire after me. So it ended up being a pretty useful strategy to just paint the ground in fire and stand there and let all the enemies come to you. They bake in the fire and you get to survive. So no complaints here. I really like the new armor passive, and it's got my seal of approval. So next up on the list are the Firebomb Hellpods. So this is the latest booster that was added to the game. It lines the Hellpods with volatile incendiaries that detonate upon impact, igniting any units in vicinity of the drop site. So it not only makes your Hellpod detonate on impact, but it also makes any of the stratagems that you call in detonate on impact as well. So if you call in a resupply or a machine gun or a turret or anything that drops in a Hellpod, it's going to send out a burst of flames. Now, unfortunately, this burst of flames is pretty underwhelming. I tried to test it out in a number of different matches, but I only saw success when I was testing it out on the lower difficulties, when the majority of the enemies are small enemy types. Like if you come across a bunch of small bugs, I was getting 6 or 7 kills at a time against the smaller bugs, but once those bigger, larger bugs get involved, I almost never got any kills with this. It honestly feels pretty gimmicky, just how little damage it does. Plus, if you have this booster equipped, you have to be extra careful because you can not only catch yourself on fire, but you can catch your teammates on fire as well. So if you're calling in a resupply and everybody's waiting on it, it will land, send out a big burst of flames, and catch all of you on fire, and then you're going to have to waste a stim. So I was not impressed with the Firebomb Hellpods. There are just so many other better boosters in the game. Honestly, I feel like Arrowhead needs to completely redesign how the boosters work, or let you equip multiple boosters at the same time, because I just don't see much of a reason to equip this booster compared to like having extra ammo or taking less damage. Like, there's just so many better options of boosters out there. So unfortunately, I was not very impressed with the new Firebomb Hellpods. So next up on our list is the brand new SG-451 Cookout shotgun. Now this is a pump shotgun that fires a burst of incendiary phosphorus pellets, setting targets ablaze. It does 320 damage, it has a capacity of 16, it has a recoil of 100, and a fire rate of 80. It comes with light armor penetrating, it has reload rounds, and of course it does incendiary damage. Now there are no special attachments to this weapon, there's no flashlight, there's no rate of fire change, it's just, you know, what you see is what you get. And this weapon comes with 60 shots in total. Now I did end up enjoying this weapon. I do feel like this is a pretty fun weapon to use. It feels like it's a combination of the Slugger and the Punisher that does fire damage, and I like both the Slugger and the Punisher, so of course I'm probably going to like this weapon weapon as well. I feel like this is a good alternative to the Breaker Incendiary. So I know a lot of people love the Breaker Incendiary, but with its latest nerf, a lot of people are going to be looking for an alternative, and I feel like this is a pretty good option. It does feel like it hits pretty hard, and it has decent stagger and knockback power, so if enemies are charging at you and getting up in your face, just pop them with a couple shots and it will stop them in their tracks. I found this was pretty useful when I was getting charged by brood commanders or the nursing spewers or bile spewers. I found that if you're pretty accurate with your shots, you can take out a nursing spewer in just 2 to 3 shots to the face, so that's definitely pretty useful. As for the fire damage that this thing puts off, I feel that it's just kind of okay. It wasn't blowing me away by how much damage it was putting out. It just kind of does a little bit of tick damage. But because this weapon has such a high base damage of 320, a lot of the damage that this weapon deals out is going to be from the base impact, and then the extra ticks of fire damage is kind of just like the bonus on top. I found it was pretty useful for spraying onto bug breaches, so anytime there was a bug breach, I would just sit back and just spray onto the bug breach, and it would catch all the enemies on fire. Now, unfortunately, I was not having very much luck when it came to facing chargers. With the recent change to the fire damage and how fire damage works in the latest update, they made it so it's a lot harder to damage armored enemies with fire damage. You basically have to shoot their weak spots, otherwise it's not going to do anything. When you're going up against a charger, all of your shotgun pellets just ping right off its armor, so unfortunately it just doesn't do much damage to a charger. When I was going up against a charger, I tried the whole hitting it with a stun grenade and running behind it and shooting it in the butt, but I was just pumping shot after shot into the charger's butt and it wasn't doing anything. So I don't know if I was just unlucky or what, but I tried to test it out on at least 4 different chargers and I was not having any luck at all against chargers. So if you were expecting this weapon to take on chargers, unfortunately you're not going to have very much luck in that regard. So overall, with the SG-451 Cookout, when it comes to facing the Terminids, I would say it's a pretty good option. I was enjoying myself and I was actually having fun using this weapon when facing the Terminids. Now on the automaton side of things, unfortunately I was just not having very much luck against the automatons. Now obviously this weapon's going to take out the small weaker robots with ease, because I mean, let's be honest, all your weapons are going to take out the small robots with ease, and it did an okay job at like the Devastators and those medium tier enemies, but when I was facing up against those berserkers with like the chainsaw arms, it was doing like nothing to those guys. And the Hulks, it does like absolutely nothing against the Hulks as well. I was struggling against the Hulks. Kind of the same deal for the Scout Striders. You basically just have to run up behind the Scout Strider and shoot them in the back. And at that point, I mean, any weapon you use is going to have an effect against the Scout Striders. So this weapon was not impressing me against the automatons. I feel like there's just so many better options out there for the automatons. You don't really want to get too up close and personal when facing automatons, but that's kind of as expected. I wasn't expecting this Warbond to do very well against the automatons because, you know, fire damage isn't really that good against the automatons. It can kill them, and it does a good job when they're like grouped up together, but normally you don't want to get too up close and personal with the automatons because they're probably going to just wreck your face. So I would say that the SG-451 Cookout is a solid option for the Terminids, and it's not very good against the automatons. So next up is the brand new FLAM 66 Torture. Now the description says it's a lightweight flamethrower, shoots pressurized fuel through a dispersion nozzle into an open flame. It says that it does 250 damage per second, it has a capacity of 80 and a recoil of 3. And then for the weapon traits, it has medium armor penetrating and incendiary damage. And for this weapon, it also does not come with any attachments, so you're not going to find any flashlights or different rate of fire or different scope zoom variations. You know, what you see is what you get. And it does hold a total of, I guess, 80 rounds, or just 80 fuel, however you want to look at it. It can hold up to a total of 6 fuel canisters, so I wasn't finding ammo to be too much of an issue. Now, as for how this thing performs in combat, I honestly was kind of enjoying this weapon. I've already seen a lot of backlash on Discord and Reddit from people saying that this thing needs a major buff, but I was having a lot of fun using this weapon. I found that it was very easily clearing out hordes of Terminids. Anytime there was a bug breach, I would just spray the ground and spray the bug breach, and I was getting like 20 to 30 plus kills almost every single time. And I was having a blast. I was actually looking forward to those bug breaches because I knew I was going to get an easy like 20 kills. It does unfortunately have a major downside though, and it has like almost no stopping power and stagger. So if you're spraying into a big horde of bugs, they are going to be able to charge right through your flames and attack you. So if you're going up against some hunters or a charger or a brood commander and they're sprinting towards you, they're not going to be stopped by your flames. They're just going to charge right through it and they're going to take you out. So that is a pretty big downside, and I think that's some of the reason why so many people are upset with this weapon. It feels a little bit underpowered in that regard. It's definitely not a good feeling when you're spraying at a bunch of bugs and they just truck right through the fire and attack you anyway. But in my testing, I found that it actually works better if you spray the ground and catch everything on fire and let the bugs run into the fire instead of spraying the bugs directly with the flames. I also found that it's one of the best weapons in the game for taking out the terminid eggs. So if you're on a terminid egg mission and you have to go and blow up like 50, 60 eggs at one time, you just run in, spray the eggs, and get out. So I highly recommend this weapon for those types of missions. And I found that this weapon did a pretty decent job at taking out any enemies less than a charger. The chargers, on the other hand, were a little bit more difficult to take out. With the recent update where they changed the way that fire works, I feel like they made that change specifically because of this warbond and specifically because of this weapon, because obviously you can no longer kill chargers by cooking their front legs. Before this update, you could just spray a charger and they would die in like 3 to 4 seconds, and after this latest update, you can no longer cook chargers, so no matter where you spray at on a charger other than their butt, it's not going to do anything to them. But however, if you hit them with a stun grenade, run behind them, and just cook their butt, you will be able to blow up their butt and they'll bleed out in just a couple of seconds. So if I had to rate this weapon against the Terminids, I would say that this is also a pretty solid choice. I was having a lot of fun with it, and my only complaint was, like I said earlier, there's no stopping power or stagger, so those bugs are going to be able to charge right through your flames and take you out. But considering this is a primary flamethrower, this does give you the option to kind of mix and match and play around with different stratagems. So if you want to like combine, let's say, this flamethrower with the Stalwart or the heavy machine gun or an expendable anti-tank rifle, like this gives you a couple more options to play around with. So I really like the fact that they added a primary flamethrower, because now I have the option to play around with different stratagems. And then as for the automatons, I was not having very much luck against the automatons. Depending on the mission you're doing, like I did an extermination mission where a bunch of the automatons were kind of grouped up together, or if you run into an automaton base and you find a bunch of enemies kind of grouped up, you can take them all out kind of simultaneously. It's going to wreck those smaller robots, and it does a great job at taking out scout striders. The problem is, obviously, you have to be really up close and personal to use this thing. It does not have very good range, and all the automatons have ranged weapons, so they're going to be picking you off and shooting at you before you can even get close enough to use this thing. And then, of course, the automatons have so many big enemies like hulks and tanks and, you know, that kind of stuff, and it's going to have very little, if any, effect at all against hulks and tanks and cannons and that kind of stuff. So I definitely don't recommend using this against the automatons unless you want to put yourself at a major disadvantage. So to summarize this weapon, I think it's a good choice against the Terminids. I was able to get some pretty big kill streaks and I was having some fun, and then I was getting pretty pooped on when I was going up against the automatons, and obviously I wasn't having too much fun there. And then finally, the last weapon on this list is the new secondary weapon. It's the P-72 Crisper. It says it's a compact, handheld style flamethrower able to project a jet of fire over short distances. It does 250 damage per second, it has a capacity of 30 and a recoil of 3. It says that it has medium armor penetrating, it has incendiary damage, and it's one-handed. It has no attachments and it can hold up to 30 rounds of fuel. And this weapon works about as well as you would probably think. It's just a secondary flamethrower. You pull this out in a quick pinch, maybe some bugs are charging at you and they're getting up in your face, or you come across a large group of bugs all clustered up together. You pull this thing out, do a quick little burst of fire damage, and you can normally cook any bugs that are in the area. Obviously, it's going to struggle against those bigger bugs, like you're not going to have very much luck against like chargers and stuff like that. Like it can kill a charger if you shoot it in its butt. It's just going to take pretty much all of your ammo if you're going to take out a charger with this thing. But obviously, it's also really good against like the bug egg missions, so if you have to take out the bug eggs, this is a great option. There's a couple different times where I was able to get some pretty big kill streaks with this thing. Anytime there's a bug breach or you're in a bug nest and there's a ton of grouped up Terminids, just paint the ground with fire and all the bugs running through your flames are going to get cooked. I was using this weapon to cut off some choke points and stuff. Since this is a one-handed weapon, anytime I'm on the run, I can just look behind me and shoot the enemies that are chasing me. I can quickly run and shoot the ground behind me so that any enemies chasing me will get caught on fire. And honestly, I was having a lot of fun with this sidearm as well. And then of course, as always, against the automatons, it's kind of the same deal against the automatons. If for some reason you're really up close to a bunch of automatons grouped up together, or if you're up close and personal to like a scout strider, it is going to be able to take them out. But if you're going up against anything big like a Hulk or a tank or a heavy devastator, it is going to struggle against those enemy types. So for the P272 Crisper, I did like it against the Terminids. It's honestly probably one of the go-to choices against the Terminids. For me personally, I'm either going to probably pick this or the grenade pistol. I just still love the grenade pistol so much because it's good at like blowing up the bug holes. But this is a pretty good secondary. I don't really have too many complaints with it. I would maybe say I would want some more ammo in it, but you know, this is a secondary, so it's not going to be able to hold as much ammo as a primary, so I mean that's kind of just a nitpick. But overall, I really enjoyed the P72 Crisper, and I can't really complain too much about it. So that is going to do it for my thoughts on the Freedom's Flame Warbond. Overall, I'd say that this Warbond is fairly decent. I mean, it's a good Warbond against Terminids. It's just obviously not very good against the automatons, which kind of sucks, but could they be buffed in some ways? Sure. Does the new change to fire damage suck? Yes, obviously. And like I said, I do feel like they made this change to fire damage specifically because of this Warbond. If they would have kept fire damage the way that it was before, everybody'd be running around killing chargers in just 3 to 4 seconds with their new primary flamethrower or their secondary flamethrower, and I feel like the devs didn't want that to happen. Which is fine in my opinion, as long as they go back and buff the flamethrower stratagem. If you're going to have a primary flamethrower and a secondary flamethrower, it's fine if they're a little bit weaker, but they need to go back and do something to make that flamethrower stratagem worth using. If they would just buff the stratagem flamethrower so that it could kill those chargers in 3 or 4 seconds again, then I feel like we'd be in a good spot. That way the primary flamethrower isn't too overpowered, and that would actually give people a reason to still bring that stratagem flamethrower. So if the developers buff the stratagem flamethrower so that it can kill chargers again, I feel like that would make a lot of the community happy. But that's going to do it for my thoughts on this Warbond. Let me know what you guys think down in the comment section down below. Are you guys liking these weapons? Are you hating these weapons? Do you feel like they need buffed or nerfed? Any and all comments are welcome down below. And if you made it this far into the video, please consider giving it a thumbs up. It's greatly appreciated and helps me out in the algorithm. If you're new here, hit the subscribe button and hit the bell for notifications. That way you don't miss out on any future Helldivers 2 videos. And that is going to do it for me, and I will talk to you all next time.